Shipbuilding is an art as old as man. It has grown from the laborious shaping of handmade dugouts to the creation of modern ocean liners and ships of war. This is a story of action in the yards of Bethlehem Steel Company and of the transformation of those yards from peacetime work to war production on an unprecedented scale, when launchings virtually became an everyday occurrence. When a ship of war is committed to its element in wartime, it is indeed a dramatic moment. Here the cruiser Topeka is being readied for launching at the Quincy Yard, where in the past, many warships have gone down the ways. A rigid schedule sets every operation right on the minute. The moment toward which hundreds of men have been working draws closer and closer, the crew moves swiftly against time. For launchings are set according to tides. While the clock ticks on, various preparatory operations are completed and recorded. On the launching platform, there is an air of subdued expectation. But along the greased ways, men perform last-minute chores. Men at the launching trigger stand ready to spring the release.
I christen thee USS Topeka.
Today we have seen another cruiser, the Topeka, successfully launched. And within the very near future, she will be outfitted and on her way to join the fleet. This ship will not be a stranger in the fighting forces of our Navy. In the service are battleships, aircraft carriers, light and heavy cruisers, destroyers, and many other fighting craft built and launched in Bethlehem Yards. This cruiser was built by men whose forefathers created the world-famed clipper ships, the Flying Cloud, the Sovereign of the Seas, and a host of others. The clipper has now vanished from the seas, but out of the past have been preserved the skill and experience that have contributed so much to the great shipbuilding programs of today.
Ever since the days of the Phoenician galleys, shipbuilding has been a proud heritage of all maritime nations. In carrying on that heritage, the yards of Bethlehem Shipbuilding Division have served the United States Navy and Merchant Marine for many years. 3 of these yards have been in continuous operation for nearly a century. In today's ultra-modern ships of war, trim and terrible in their fighting efficiency, there is strong evidence of the progress made in that century of American shipbuilding. Immortal in the history of the sea are the Flying Cloud and other famed American clippers. Yet so swift was the pace of progress that within the span of a single generation, the tall spars and great sails were made obsolete. All along the trade routes appeared a new order of ships, bigger, faster, and ever more of them, with hulls of iron, then steel, instead of white oak. Shipbuilding grew from a handful of skilled artisans to a vast army of ship workers drawn from most of the sciences and skills known to man. Bethlehem's entry into shipbuilding was a significant move, a step of great importance to the nation as well as to the company. It was just after the turn of the century that Charles M. Schwab, then head of Bethlehem, united several shipyards under one management. Mr. Schwab's dynamic leadership and capacity for organization endowed this consolidation of shipbuilding interests with the same remarkable progress and enterprise that already had marked his accomplishments in American industry. In that original nucleus of Bethlehem shipbuilding were represented the finest traditions of the craft. From the Quincy Yard, then known as Fall River, had been launched some of the most distinguished American ships of war. Palatial yachts, the only seven-masted schooner in history, America's first steam trawler, and a succession of clipper ships. Sparrows Point Shipyard in Baltimore Harbor was well known for its cargo and passenger vessels, its tankers and ore boats, and the ferries which plied the harbors of several large eastern cities. On the Pacific coast, San Francisco Yard, then known as the Union Iron Works, was famed as builder of the battleship Oregon and Dewey's flagship, the Olympia, and as a producer of gold dredges and mining machinery. New construction is carried out in 8 shipbuilding yards located at 5 principal ports on the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. The vast production facilities of these 8 yards enabled Bethlehem to undertake an emergency shipbuilding program involving more than 1,000 craft of a greater variety than ever before attempted by a single builder. Of all the construction earmarked for private contractors in the gigantic 2-ocean Navy program, 35% was assigned to Bethlehem. Well known to seafaring men everywhere are Bethlehem-built ships of commerce, splendid safe ocean liners, fast, dependable cargo vessels, tankers, ore boats, ferries, tugs, and equally familiar and highly respected are the fighting ships to guarantee them safe passage. How do ships come into being? Who figures out the multitude of minute details that determine what goes where? From a simple outline of the major requirements, speed, principal dimensions, type, and capacity, the ship grows in men's minds and in preliminary sketches. Every feature of construction, big and little, is worked out on the drawing board. After the design has been completed, the plans for the hull go to the mold loft, where the lines of the hull are laid out full size on the floor. And this body plan remains on the floor till the ship is finished. Of course, to the eye of the layman, this doesn't mean very much.
Oh, sure it does. It's easy to understand once you get onto it. Just think of these lines as cross-sections of a hull taken every 4 feet or so. Lay these cross-section lines inside one another. This is what you'd see. Only here we lay out the lines first and build the hull to fit. At least we mark the templates that serve as the pattern. See, that's what they're doing, marking the templates. Gauges, you might call them, as a guide for shaping the plates.
But just a minute. This plan covers only one side of the hull.
Well, that's right. Take the port templates and reverse them, and you have the templates for starboard matching exactly.
Of course, a perfect match. Looks as though that kind of work would be pretty hard on the knees.
Oh, no, we have men here who've been on their hands and knees almost all of their working lives. Well, I'd better get back to work, but you follow the templates along and you'll see the ship grow right up out of them.
That loftsman is right. A complete set of templates could be assembled into a full-size model of the hull. Numbered and marked, they go to the fabricating shop where they serve as patterns for the steel. Let's follow a Victory ship through the assembly line at the Bethlehem Fairfield Yard, starting in the fabricating shop. This is how the sub-assemblies begin to take form. inner bottom sections are prefabricated far from the ways. This method of assembly calls for extreme accuracy in fabrication, but the extra care more than pays for itself in increased production. Here at the building ways, the men are placing the keel blocks and running the center line. On them, the keel is laid, a section at a time. Traditionally, this is considered the first step in the birth of a ship. Assembled sections, which we saw in the fabricating shop, come to the yard by the train load. The train is made up so that each assembly arrives right at the place where it is needed. The way those huge cranes pick up ponderous loads makes them appear almost human. It may seem that a shipyard is a place of slow motion, but that's merely because the materials are usually bulky and heavy. 30-ton assemblies can't be handled like boards and bricks. Actually, production is efficient and continuous. Although materials, methods, and tools have changed greatly since the time of the romantic clippers, the building of a ship today is even a more precise art than it was in olden times. Another Victory ship is launched and bustled off to the outfitting pier. Actually, we have seen only the major steps in the job, because behind the completion of a vessel stretches the longest assembly line in the world. But it takes all America to build a ship. Through contracting and subcontracting, more than 30,000 individual enterprises contribute to production in the Bethlehem yards. There is no section of the United States or of its people that does not play a part in sending an American ship to sea. Thousands of men from dozens of specialized crafts are necessary to assemble and install the various materials and equipment that go into a ship. The sheet metal workers, welders, riveters, painters, electricians, machinists, pipe fitters, cabinet makers, and riggers are but a few of the types of trained workmen who put their hearts and souls and sweat into ships. And so, completely outfitted and moving under her own power, she's off for her trial run. Then it's the 7 seas and ports of all nations. But building ships is only part of the story. Like all man-made machines, they must be serviced every so often, kept trim and efficient. That calls for another set of particular skills and a great deal of special equipment and facilities. 10 of Bethlehem's 15 yards are devoted wholly or in part to ship repairs, reconditioning, and conversions. In the critical years of World War II, they serviced thousands of vessels of all kinds and descriptions. Dry docking is a major operation in repair yards. However, most repair work is done when vessels are alongside piers. Then there are the floating dry docks. Here, a big liner is about to be docked in Bethlehem's 22,000-ton unit at the San Francisco yard. First, the dock is submerged by flooding the watertight pontoons. With the ship in position on the keel blocks, it is lifted through the buoyancy of the dock as the water is pumped out. High and dry, she is ready for the repair gangs. Routine service may consist of anything from filling up nicks and propellers to overhauling turbines and engines. Inevitable accumulations of foulings which slow down a vessel's speed must be cleaned off every 6 to 9 months. Legal requirements, safety, and insurance provisions demand that big ocean liners and other ships put in for a complete overhaul at regular intervals. An outstanding asset to a nation is the ability to convert peacetime vessels to war usage. With their wide pre-war experience in conversion work and their extensive facilities, Bethlehem yards have been in position to transform hundreds of cargo vessels into hospital ships, training ships, and naval auxiliaries of many types. Through the years, Bethlehem had expanded and improved its repair yards. It was those facilities at Boston, New York, Baltimore, Los Angeles, and San Francisco that were to prove so important when the dark clouds of war rolled up on the horizon. After the lightning of Mars did begin to strike, a new kind of job started to come into the yards. There was a war on our doorstep. Some of us didn't realize it, but ship repairmen saw it and gained some insight, too, into the work ahead. For with the first shot of the war, the dry docks of European nations practically went out of business. Overnight, American yards became jammed with work. Uncle Sam had become the ship repairman for most of the world. And almost simultaneously, word came that the United States was embarking on the greatest shipbuilding program in world history. A.B. Homer, vice president in charge of Bethlehem Shipbuilding Division, and his staff faced their problem.
the Navy and the Maritime Commission have called on us to do the biggest job that has ever been done in the history of shipbuilding. As a starter, they want us to construct 73 warships of several different types and also almost 100 cargo carriers, all to be built in a shorter time than has ever been done before.
That's 20 times as many ships as we've built in any recent year.
Yes, but that's only the beginning. It will mean a tremendous expansion of our own shipyards and the building of new ones. It will mean the hiring and training of many thousands of men and women. It needs the highest degree of coordination of effort. It seems like a job that is impossible to do, but it must be done, and I know we can do it.
To meet that challenge, new building ways were constructed at existing yards on both coasts. Old ways were stepped up in production efficiency. Repair facilities were greatly enlarged. In Baltimore Harbor rose a new and modern shipbuilding unit with 16 ways. This was Bethlehem Fairfield, constructed by the company on a directive from the Maritime Commission for the building of Liberty ships. Within 9 months, Fairfield was turning out Liberties at a tremendous pace. This was achieved through techniques evolved from broad experience, research, and modern facilities. But these alone don't build ships. You must have manpower, plenty of it. During the first year of surcharge operation, Bethlehem manpower had doubled. Yet there were only a relatively few trained shipyard workers from whom to draw for the new expansions. Indeed, in all America, there were hardly enough to fill the original needs. So Bethlehem, at all its yards, undertook the prodigious task of wholesale training of men and women to the requirements of their jobs. Salesmen, clerks, and cab drivers, housewives, waitresses, and models, all ages and from all stations in life, were indoctrinated by groups and given individual aptitude tests to determine latent abilities. Thousands upon thousands who never had worked in a shipyard, many who never had worked with tools of any kind, were schooled in advanced shipbuilding techniques. It was America from Main Street to Metropolis learning a vital business. There was practical training in pipe fitting, in electrical wiring, in welding, and in all the other trades and crafts of shipbuilding. And then, out on the job, under supervision, where theory and schooling became practice. Soon, thousands of qualified workers completely mastered their new skills. They have built a great American fleet of ships, and they are still building them. But to them, it was more than just a job. It was a race against time, against the black time which many sensed was coming, but when or from where, no one knew. As the months wore on, record after record was broken. At Quincy, the battleship Massachusetts was launched far ahead of schedule, and more fighting ships for a two-ocean navy and cargo vessels were going down the ways at San Francisco well in advance of established dates, while at San Pedro and Staten Island, new destroyer programs were making good progress. And at Fairfield, where production of Liberties was in full swing...
You know, Herb, I've just been thinking. A few months ago, kids were fishing right out there where we're launching ships today. And boy, that's getting into production in a hurry.
Well, keep your fingers crossed. We're only starting. And the farther we go, the tougher it'll get.
You mean more shortages?
Well, I mean that and other things, too. Well, every time I think I see a way to pick up a couple of days or just a couple of hours, I run into more hurdles. This is impossible. You can't do that. And always for some very good reason.
Sure, but you always manage to find some way.
Mm-hmm. But it's tough going sometimes.
Well, toward the end of the week, a man gets to feel that way. But by Monday morning, you'll feel entirely different.
Sure, I know. Monday, I'll feel a lot different about everything.
Yes, that next Monday morning, we all felt a lot different about our jobs. It was our war now, for sure. The black time had come. And from top management down, the whole organization pledged a redoubling of effort that already had seen peak performance. E.G. Grace, Bethlehem's president, with A.B. Homer, vice president, and others, on a regular tour stop at Staten Island Yard to study the progress of the destroyer program. The executive staff strove harder than ever to maintain the closest cooperation as fighting ships were rushed to completion. All news from the Pacific was bad news at first. And in the Atlantic, 1 a day, 2 a day, 5 a day, our ships were going to the bottom or burning like torches, victims of submarine wolf packs. So against that vicious mass attack, which was to sink some 2 million gross tons of American cargo vessels in the first year of our war, was developed a new weapon, the destroyer escort. Trim, smart, and sturdy, the DE was a specialized ship with a very definite job to do, to make the sea lanes safe for our convoys. Just outside Boston Harbor, a few miles from Quincy, a stretch of clam flat was transformed into the Bethlehem Hingham Yard, one of the most advanced shipbuilding operations in the world. Its 16 ways, its enormous fabricating shop, its thousands of employees at once began to make their weight felt in the Battle of the Atlantic. Undreamed of speed and efficiency were reached in mass production of destroyer escorts. Prefabrication of easily handled sections was one of the secrets. The ship design was broken down into units, each of which was assembled before going to the shipways or to the storage yard where banks of sections were constantly maintained. Bigger in every way and tougher than the regular destroyers of World War I, the DEs have what it takes to battle the Axis submarines. Back in that other war, the record building time for a destroyer was 45 days. But at Hingham, they launched a destroyer escort 4.5 days after key laying and delivered her complete and ready for action 25 days after keel laying. During one raw winter weekend, 5 ships went down the ways. 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and the 5th on Monday. In the outfitting basin, Uncle Sam's newest subbusters, as many as 16 at a time, were armed, supplied, fueled, and completely prepared for their part in the Battle of the Atlantic or the patrol of the Pacific. Formal and impressive are the commissioning ceremonies as the crew takes over this new destroyer escort, turned over to the British Navy and about to go to war. The sponsor comes to wish the personnel good hunting and safe return. After that, ship and crew receive the blessing of the church.
Bless this ship and all who sail thereon, and guide them in the course that leads to victory and peace. Amen.
The captain welcomes all hands to his new command. With ceremonies over, all hands to stations, the ship puts out to sea. Their assignment is officially described as escort duty, but they're looking for action. With the enemy solidly entrenched on islands and continents, it was realized that if our forces were to effect beachheads, they literally would have to begin fighting before they reached shore. The answer was landing craft. 2 of the major and larger types were LSTs for tanks and LCIs for infantry. Bethlehem's share of these was distributed among the Hingham, Fairfield, and Quincy yards, although at that time, each yard was engaged at top speed on other war work. The pressing need for great quantities of these revolutionary vessels gave them high priorities. It was another and severe test of Bethlehem's proved ability to produce varied types of vessels, large and small. Application of the efficient assembly line methods, vindicated in building Liberties and DEs, turned the trick. New shapes and silhouettes came out of the fabricating shops in an ever-increasing stream. Once again, the men and women of Bethlehem had rolled up their sleeves and written their bit of world history with flame cutters and welding torches. From the launching ways, they slid off to action, Africa, Normandy, islands in the South Pacific, wherever Allied strategy called for amphibious operations. At the Bethlehem Alameda Yard on the Oakland Estuary in the San Francisco Bay, hard-hitting combat troop ships, among the finest transports ever constructed, took to sea to join the attack. From the battles of Midway and Coral Sea came good news, victory news. But the good news had its price. The aircraft carrier Lexington was part of that price. To the workers of Bethlehem, that was a personal loss. For the Lexington had been built at Quincy, and now she was gone. But the name carried on. From the same shipyard, that same year, another Lexington, bigger, more powerful, took to the water, and shortly afterward went out to join the fleet. Meanwhile, the carrier Wasp, completed at Quincy only months before, was making history, convoying ships, delivering the planes that saved Malta and perhaps the Mediterranean. And in the Pacific, she earned the name of the one-ship task force in a series of fierce slugging matches. It was a desperate game, for high stakes, and played for keeps. Finally, the luck of the Wasp ran out. She was part of the price of another vital Pacific victory, and so the Wasp was gone. But not for long. Another Wasp, twice as big, 4 times as formidable, slid down the ways. Stepped-up construction had built her in half the time required for her famous namesake. Some of the feats accomplished in that accelerated construction almost stagger the imagination. For instance, lifting 200-ton sections of the superstructure from quayside to the flight deck. But because such jobs were done, and because they were done throughout a round-the-clock working day, the Wasp went to sea months ahead of schedule. In the half-light of a gray November dawn, the great carrier slipped her lines, and nuzzled by 15 thrashing tugs, started off to war, away from the outfitting slip, leaving the yard that created her, while thousands of eyes looked up to watch her go. Just 5 months after the Wasp sailed to join the fleet, another giant aircraft carrier went down Quincy's ways. She was christened the John Hancock, illustrious name in American history. And after a record outfitting, that mighty addition to the battle fleet, dressed in war camouflage, presented a strange and arresting appearance as the ship steamed slowly through the narrow waters. Within 2 years after Pearl Harbor, from Bethlehem Yards had come a fleet of 542 vessels, enough to qualify many a nation as a strong sea power. This total consisted of 232 fighting ships, including a battleship, aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, landing craft, and transports, and 310 cargo vessels and tankers. And this was only the beginning. Bethlehem management made a worldwide report of progress when E.G. Grace, president, broadcast a message to the 300,000 men and women of Bethlehem, to all America, and by shortwave overseas from a destroyer at Staten Island.
We are now well along in our war program of 1,000 ships for the Navy and Merchant Marine. A year ago, I pledged that Bethlehem would build a ship of day of major size for every day in the year. I don't mind saying that there were times when I was doubtful of reaching that goal. But we have made good on that pledge with several ships to spare. War needs ships. The United States production of ships has been a prime factor in turning the tide to victory. There's no other navy afloat that ship for ship, man for man, gun for gun, can equal the United States fleet. And we are proud to have had a major part in the building of this magnificent fighting force. We are in the swing. We have learned how to do impossible things, and we will continue to do the impossible as war needs may require.
Production was maintained at an unremitting pace as the endless procession of ships continued to join the fleet. Yes, at Bethlehem Shipyards, as throughout the entire United States, the impossible became commonplace. No nation ever was faced with greater tasks. No people could have performed them more efficiently. With that proven ability and the preservation of our American heritage, we all can face the tomorrows unafraid.